Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the updated Battlegroup overview for the 17th SS-Panzergrenadier, and this is probably a division that's changed the most since release. There is a ton of changes, a ton of balance updates that have occurred that have changed this division around in different ways, so I'm sure you guys have anticipated this one for a little while and I've had a few requests to do it. So here it is finally, and I will be talking through my unit decisions and exactly what has changed, but let's start of course with the Recon. So this part of the division has definitely changed a lot. I'm currently now sitting on 3 cards of Spähstrup, which gives me a total of 12 Recon infantry, which I feel is probably the most ideal in the current meta. I feel like Aufkläder, they die too easily at the moment, and just in general, they have the same stealth as a Spähstrup, but they're 2 less men. And the Spähstrup can definitely hold the line themselves with this MG34, especially if they're stationed in a building. So that gives them a lot more versatility if you want to use them as some sort of like extra bulk for your infantry. Whereas the Aufkläder don't really have that choice. They're very specialized, you want to keep them hidden, and yeah, you can do the same with a Spähstrup anyway, so why not just have Spähstrup? The other thing with the Recon in this division is it's quite expensive, because the Aufkläder in Phase A come in the SPW221, which is a decent armoured car because of its AAP, great for killing half-tracks, but lacks the HE to really be super useful for its price. It's like 40 points for 8 AP. It's not great at all, not very good value for money, and I wouldn't recommend bringing it in. I used to bring them in because they're quite fun to use. Actually, I think in my original division I didn't actually have them at all, but still an interesting unit to play around with. In Phase B, the SPW222s, you guys know that I like the 222s a lot, but I don't feel like the cost is worth it in the later phases, because the 222s kind of fall off quite hard into Phase B. So in Phase A they can be really useful, but in Phase B it's only just worth getting, and I don't really have the activation points to bring in more Recon. The Aufkläder would probably be the ones I picked if I had an extra activation point. The BMW R75 did get the price reduction and can be useful in certain situations, especially for pushing salients, but other than that, not as good in my opinion as having a Spähstrup squad on the ground. A lot more resilient the Spähstrup are. Now the other thing you might notice is that I have none of the armoured cars now, and it's quite simply because they aren't very good value for money anymore. The SPW233, I think at the time I made the first Battlegroup overview, used to have very high optics, but now it does not, and that's a real shame because it's well overpriced if it doesn't have that extra recon capability, and that's pretty much the reasoning for that. So if we move on to the infantry, things are similar, a few changes, we'll go through them. Panzergrenadier, same old stuff, you want some Phase A command infantry of course. Spähstrup, great for contesting buildings in the early phases, and can really rip to shreds things like rifle squads that some of the infantry divisions might be spamming at you. The other thing is that they come with the Panzerfaust that can really assist with your Panzergrenadiers, because your Panzergrenadiers don't have the Panzerfaust in this division. Then I do of course have the Panzergrenadiers. They have the 2 MG42s, which is really, really strong. Panzergrenadiers in this division come in pretty cheap as well, due to them coming into the KFZ 70, so 30 points a pop, and only 20 points a pop as well with the Spähstrup, so pretty cheap infantry options. You're not forced to bring them in half tracks early on, and that can really increase the availability you have of infantry on the field early on, which makes this quite a strong Phase A division in some cases. Then I have a card of the MG42s. These have the 800 meter range with 9 HE, really strong unit for pinning down infantry in the early game, especially when they won't necessarily have the strong fire support to counter them. And yeah, just can be great for pinning down squads and tearing them apart in the open. So I think it's worth having the MG42. The only thing I might consider in this division is maybe dropping a card of the Panzergrenadiers in Phase A, but I always find that I'm using a lot of infantry just to gain ground early on, and that's where the 2 cards of Panzergrenadiers comes in handy, as opposed to like dropping one, gaining more availability in Phase B. Now, in order to get that extra availability in Phase B, I don't actually have another command unit in Phase B. I have 1 card of the Stoss Troop to get some more of those, 1 card of the Pioneers because they have the extra HE grenades. Those 2 HE grenades make them great for close combat, and then I've got an extra card of Panzergrenadiers, 6 more of those in Phase B as well. And I think having 6 of each gives you the diversity you need in order to make the right choices in what you want to bring in. So if you're fighting in towns, for example, the Stoss Troop, if you can use their smoke grenades properly, you can get them into really, really good positions to not only take out vehicles, but also just to demolish infantry in close quarters combat. Pioneers also do a similar role, but I find that they have a lot more sort of versatility. So again, maybe in the town, but more a forest engagement. You have the higher strength squad, and the HE grenade will do the job. That's what I would use those for if you're contesting small forest areas. I wouldn't recommend ever going into a large forest area with the 17th SS-Panzergrenadiers. But then just more Panzergrenadiers, same old stuff. Your basic line infantry, hold the line. You're going to need more availability of them, so having more of them in Phase B is ideal. But yeah, the only real change that I would make is maybe dropping a card of Panzergrenadiers in Phase A if I find I'm not using them all, and then putting them in Phase B. But that's something that I would just sort of change on the fly, and it's definitely something that requires testing. And like if I play a game and I find I don't use all my units in Phase A, I might change it, then I might change it back the next day. It's really dependent, and I think a lot of deck building in like this game and like Wargame, for example, it's all to do with feel and like how you think you play the deck and how much infantry you use and so on. But currently I have it in this setup. As for tanks, now tanks has changed a lot in this division. There's been some changes to the Stug 4s and the Stug 3s. So the Stug 3s are gone, or the majority of them, other than the Stug 3 F8 in Phase A. And now we've got the Stug 4s in Phase B and Phase C. So I believe this is the same as it was before, except from the Stugs have lost their veterancy, but they've gained range. So you can see they now have 1,200 meter range. This is a big difference. They have lowered AP, but at 1,000 meter range, which was their previous range, they have the same AP as they did before. So at 1,000 meter range, they have 14 AP. So if you're playing them at that 1,000 meter range, they're basically the same as the Stug 4s used to be. But this just allows them much more flexibility in picking off units at range and makes them so much better than choosing any form of Marders in the anti-tank tab. So Stug 4s, really, really good. I guess the only benefit of bringing in Marders in the anti-tank tab is that they're cheaper. But we'll get to that later. In the meantime, 2 Stug 4s in Phase B is my choice so far. And then I'm bringing in 2 of these Befehl Panzer IV H's in Phase C, along with 4 of the Stug 4s once again. The Befehl Panzers were changed about a bit as well. They were like reallocated into different cards just to spread them out. But bringing in more command in Phase C to accompany the Stug 4s is definitely necessary to give them the extra 1-star, which makes them so much more accurate than they are originally. So yeah, big changes to the Stug 4s, and definitely something to consider when you are bringing them in. The tank tab got considerably stronger with the 12th SS-Panzergrenadier. In the support tab, I have definitely changed this a lot since I started playing the game and created my original battle group overview, because I used to really dislike IG-18s. IG-18s, however, since the latest battle group or last battle group overview, gained 200 meter range, which is what made them really strong and made everyone use them. They have recently had a accuracy debuff, so instead of having 4 accuracy, they now have 3 accuracy, but they still do the same job of pinning down infantry very quickly and can kill them off too. And since you have the 1-star veterancy on these IG-18s, making them 2-star with a command nearby, makes them actually quite efficient as well. So that's quite nice. The other thing I have in Phase A is more command, so the SBW 223. This is more to just accompany the Stug 3 F8 in Phase A, and also other mobile units that I might have access to, although there isn't too many, but I can keep like a 223 with the Stug 3 and maybe some artillery, for example the Nebelwerfers, and I can leave my command infantry with the rest of my infantry, which is a nice thing to have. So having just the extra command availability there makes you a lot more versatile and allows you to keep the command stars on the majority of your units throughout the game, which is really, really good. Makes you have a lot more value for money for your division. So yeah, SPW 223 in Phase A with the IG-18s. Then I've also got some Opel Blitz munitions. You get 2 trucks in Phase A, which is great, and they are fantastic for accompanying, again, the Nebelwerfer 41s. If you have a supply vehicle with each Nebelwerfer 41, what you can do is fire the barrage of rockets and then pick up the Nebelwerfer with the supply truck and move it somewhere else and unload it. Do like an unload at position, so that when it gets to that position, it unloads the Nebelwerfer and the supply will automatically resupply it in a different location, so it's completely out of the way of being counter-batteried or being hit by an airstrike. The only thing you need to be careful of with having a supply vehicle near a Nebelwerfer, though, is that if you start firing the Nebelwerfer and there's already a bomber in the sky, then you're going to get bombed. The Opel Blitz munition might blow up next to the Nebelwerfer and they get 2 kills, which is like 110 points, which is quite a big deal. So you've got to be very careful while you're doing that. Don't give away your position while you are vulnerable to being attacked. Moving into Phase B, I have the SPW 232 again for more command availability. These are mainly to accompany the tanks, the Stug 4s. However, can be used in towns to support infantry as well. Then I have more Opel Blitz munitions because I'm quite heavy on the artillery in this division. And finally, I have a card of the IG-33s, which are the buffed IG-18s. They have much higher HE value, much less rate of fire, but yeah, definitely do a lot of damage and are a solid upgrade for 70 points. Also with the 2-star veterancy, they are pretty damn accurate and demolish squads pretty quick. As for having IG-33s in Phase A, I don't feel like I ever have enough points to bring them in, so I don't bother. As for the Griller, it's again, the IG-18s do the job. In Phase B, I feel like the IG-18s definitely, or IG-33 is definitely the best choice over the Griller, because the Griller costs more and pretty much does the same job. The only thing with the IG-33s is they're not very mobile, which does mean that they are vulnerable to enemy artillery, but considering the amount of artillery you have, you should be counter-battering them the whole way. As for anti-tank, so this is, again, another one that's actually pretty similar to how I used to have it. I changed it in between, I think, but since then I've changed it back to the way it was. Kind of by accident, I guess, because it's been a very long time since I created the initial battle group overview for the 17th SS-Panzergrenadier. But basically, have Panzerschrecks in Phase A. Really good for accompanying your infantry, especially the Panzergrenadiers, to make up for their lack of a Panzerfaust. The great thing about Panzerschrecks as well is they are decently accurate, and they have the 250 meter range, which is the longest infantry AT weapon in the game in terms of range. So that's really, really useful. Then they have a card of the Pak 38s because it's always necessary to have some form of AT, like emplaced AT, in the early game to stop yourself getting overrun, so that's necessary as well. Moving into Phase B, I invest in some of the Pak 40s, however, generally what you would end up doing in Phase B now is relying on your Stug 4s to make most of the engagements because of their 1200 meter range and 12 armor, but the Pak 40, this is a decent, obviously, AT gun, which comes with the HE value as well. So really, really nice. And I would definitely recommend having at least one card of these in Phase B to accompany you. Now, like I was saying with the Marder 3s, I used to have a card of Marder 3Ms with the 1-star veterancy since they changed it, but I actually took them off because I now rely so much on the Stug 4s, which kind of fill the same role. And the Marder 3s are actually really brittle. They die very easily. But yeah, there was a change to the availability of the Marders. They changed it from 4 rookies to 2 veterans, which was nice, and that means that you get these 2 cards here now. But yeah, I don't think they're worth bringing in anymore. As for Phase C, you really want to be relying on these Pack 43s to punch through like jumbos if they come up against them. I call them the jumbo killers for a reason, because they have the 22 AP power, which is more than enough to kill a jumbo at max range. But yeah, the Pack 43 1-stars, and then I've got the 2 2-star ones, which when they're 3-star are so damn accurate and really pay themselves off pretty quickly when popping enemy Shermans and so on, because generally a Sherman's 130 points and this Pack 43 only 125 points, so you drop them off right in front of them, boom goes the Sherman, and you paid off your AT gun already. So yeah, just in general, good value for money. I like the Pack 43s a lot, especially for the late game when you might be starting to be overwhelmed by tanks, depending on what division you're up against. And that's pretty much the AT tab. As for anti-air, now this is another one that's changed quite a lot actually. In Phase A, I do have these flak fillings, and the main reason for that is with the introduction of like C-fires from the SSB, you do get quite a lot of Phase A air engagements again, and people have started to exploit that by bringing in bombers and stuff in Phase A. So having some flak fillings to get rid of like Recon aircraft and like Spitfire bombers, I feel like is quite a nice investment in Phase A if you start to see that come in. So like the reason I would like invest in a flak filling early on is if my opponent brought in a Spitfire bomb me somewhere, next time I have a tick of points, I would bring in a flak filling so that when they try and do it again, they will get at least forced to fall back in Phase A and have a longer repair time, which will be quite nice. So yeah, flak fillings there do quite a lot of damage in a short amount of time, and that can make them pretty useful. Then moving into Phase B, I'm actually relying on pure availability here. The SD KFZ 10-4s, 40 points a pop. They come with a 20mm autocannon, which isn't actually very good. Like the weapon on the back, the Flak 38, isn't too good, but just the sheer amount of availability of these I feel like makes them worth an activation point in this division, and can really help you set up a flak wall if you're struggling against enemy planes, and they really help you cover your artillery well in Phase B just by forcing the opponents to fall back more than actually shooting down enemy planes. Then when it comes to Phase C, I'm actually relying on the SDKFZ-72, which is the truck with a 37mm gun on it, the Flak 36, and this has a lot more HE and extra range. And with the availability I have of these, you can make them 2-stars, and then you'll start to actually shoot down enemy aircraft. Now you can get the 2-star variants, but I feel like in anti-air at the moment, availability is better than experience. Experience generally shoots down more, but in order to defend the artillery effectively, you're going to have more than just 2 in Phase C. So that's why I'm bringing in the 4 there. They are also pretty decent for helping you pin down ground forces, but I wouldn't recommend it because they don't have any armor. As for the other units on this air tab, we do have the flak fillings on the trucks, but their lack of range doesn't necessarily make them as worth it, and their low availability as well in Phase B. So that's why I wouldn't choose them, but still decent units. Now we go on to the artillery tab. Now this is interesting because the artillery tab's changed again quite a bit. The SK-18s were actually removed from the division entirely, so it kind of takes away the ability of the SS-Panzergrenadiers to counter battery at long range, which is a shame. But I feel like you can still do a similar job with your Nebelwerfer 41s, especially on stuff like 25 pounders, because I find that people tend to unload the 25 pounders pretty close to the front line, and therefore you might be able to hit them with a Nebelwerfer strike if you're pushing pretty hard onto them. But either way, in Phase A, Nebelwerfer 41s are pretty strong. I might recommend bringing in one of these mortars actually, like basically switching out a Nebelwerfer 41 for mortars, because I've noticed that the Nebelwerfer 41s can be quite unreliable for taking out units. So say if you wanted to use Nebelwerfer 41 for taking out an AT gun, the rockets might just go all the way around it, you don't do any damage to it, it comes back and pops your tank. Whereas if you have a mortar, it's a lot more direct and you can continue to fire at that target for a prolonged period of time, whereas a Nebelwerfer 41 will have to stop and reload for quite a while before it will fire again. Also needs the resupply, so you're going to be paying at least 110 points in Phase A for the Nebelwerfer supply truck combo. So yeah, bringing in the mortars is probably a pretty decent idea. So that's probably the only change I'd make in my Phase A. But in Phase B, I have the FK-18s there. These are the 9HE 5 round per minute. Not particularly fast firing units or artillery, but they are pretty damn cheap. They're 80 points apiece, and they do pin down units quite easily. I find that they are kind of just long-range IG-18s, and that's how I kind of play them. You just use them to pin down the infantry so that your infantry can win the engagement, and having like 4 of these on the field can be incredibly obnoxious to play against. You can not only like pin down enemy infantry, but you can counter battery quite well with them with a 2,000 meter range, and it's just really nice all round. The other thing is we have the 120mm mortar in Phase B. These guys have 1,600 meter range, but considerably more HE. So just definitely great for taking out AT guns in particular. The FK-18s can do that job, but they'll take a lot longer. 120mm mortars tend to do the job. So that's what I would bring one of those in for. If I'm being spammed by AT, then 120mm mortar will definitely do the job. And as we move later into Phase B, well, Nebelwerfer 42, I have one of these on the division because they have the 27 HE value with the large explosive napalm rockets, which are very, very useful for killing off like open top vehicles, as well as pinning down large groups of infantry in towns and so on. So yeah, quite a big variance of artillery and a very different tab to what I used to use, but I'm still playing around with it. Like I said, the change in Phase A might be necessary. I might switch out the mortars in Phase B for Nebelwerfers, all that kind of stuff. It's very variant in the 17th SS-Panzergrenadier, and generally depends on how I want to play the division and what I want to play around. So in this case, it would be playing around sort of infantry use and pinning down enemy infantry with FK-18s while I'm pushing forwards with my own. And the other thing is, it's pretty decent for AT, like anti-AT. So since the introduction of the 1200 meter range Stug 4s, having this 120mm mortar was actually pretty important for me in order to counter enemy AT guns so that my 1200 meter Stug 4s could remain dominant. And yeah, that was pretty important. So that's kind of how I'm playing it at the moment. Although it could change, of course. You could bring in the off-map in the late phases to make some ground. And of course, like I said again, the mortar in Phase A. Now the air tab, this is another work in progress as well, I guess. But quite a lot of changes going on. I actually have 5 of the Ju-87Ds on my division. This never used to be a thing. I used to not really like Stukas too much because they generally are too slow and they have bad resilience, so they get shot down relatively easy. But I found that obviously since you can get quite a lot of them, they can really be annoying for your opponents, especially if you've set up a very good flak wall. So where I have quite a lot of availability now in the anti-air tab, especially these flak billings in Phase A, it allows me to make use of Ju-87Ds in Phase A. So if, for example, I've brought in some flak fillings, I can actually exploit the 120 point Ju-87Ds, which can pinpoint kill like AT guns very quickly for you, which is really nice, and that is exactly what I would use them for. And then in Phase B, bringing in like 3 more of them, they're still very cheap for what they do and what they allow you to do, and I believe they reload pretty quickly as well. So you can just have these coming in constantly, and as long as you have the AA net up, you can basically exploit these so damn hard. As for like fighters, I'm bringing in some Focke-Wulf 190 AA8s just to be able to shoot down stuff that I pin with my anti-air. And then I've also got the Ju-87Gs in Phase B, just because the 9 AP power guns that they have, if you hit stuff in the side armor, pretty much always gets a kill. Also the 1-star veterancy helps with the accuracy there as well. So good for cleaning up tanks if you need to, again covered by the anti-air wall. And I feel like anti-air is just like incredibly strong at the moment, and definitely something worth investing in so that you can use your own strike planes. It's kind of like the whole Luftwaffe meta at the moment. You build up the flak wall and you exploit that to be able to bring in your own air-to-ground aircraft rather than fighters. Fighters almost seem like they're not necessary anymore, I don't feel, the fighters, and therefore I'm focusing a lot more on strike aircraft at the moment. But that's pretty much it. As for other units to choose in the air, you do have the MU-109G2 BR-21s, which are nice for pinpoint accurate strikes again onto AT guns and stuff with the 25 HE power. Could choose some of these instead of the Ju-87Ds, but I'm currently sort of trying out the Ju-87Ds, which is why they're in my division. As for the Ju-88s, the only Ju-88 I feel like worth bringing in is the last one here with the 25 HE power bombs, because this can like bomb out enemy sextons and like priests, like long range artillery, without being pinned down too hard over enemy AA. So probably the only ones that are really good for doing the job in that case. So yeah, Ju-88 would be the choice in that case, but not enough activation points nor card slots in the air tab to make that happen. But yeah, that's it. That is your 17th SS-Panzergrenadier. Let me know what you guys think of my division and any changes you might make yourselves. Of course, I will probably make a lot of changes to this again as I continue to play it more. I feel like this is one of the most diverse divisions in the game, and it changes a hell of a lot when I play it. Like, between games, I'll just change so much about this division, what artillery I'm using, like what aircraft I'm using, and yeah, it's still very much not a work in progress, but just such a versatile division, and you got to figure out how you want to play it. And that's probably my main sort of tip when it comes to the 17th SS. Figure out how you want to play it and build your deck and division around that. But that's all for now, guys. So yeah, let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.